Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's Cameron St. Clair, and today I'm going to be making a video all about my big move to New York City that I did a year ago. This is going to be a little bit of a different style video than I typically do. Typically I'm doing like a vlogging my experience. Right now I just feel like sitting on my floor and yapping. So that's pretty much what I'm doing, and that's what you're gonna get. But yeah, I wanted to who knows if this is gonna end up being a series, but I wanted the first episode, if you will, or video to be about like my move and my journey to New York City, because it's been a year. It's been a little bit over a year, and I do genuinely think I'm a little bit different. Actually, that's a lie. I'm very different than the person who moved to New York City a year ago. Yeah, let's just talk about it. For like context purposes, I have always wanted to live in New York City. I had an aunt and an uncle, different sides of the family, who lived out here. My aunt lived in Midtown East? Yeah, she was in Midtown East, and then she moved to Upper East. And then my uncle, before moving to Brooklyn, he used to live in Chelsea when I was in high school, so I would just visit them, and Manhattan was kind of all I knew of the city. But think about like a 16-year-old, actually, I was much younger when I first came out here, but like visiting regularly, like I would come up during spring break or summer. Not even summer, I'm sorry, that's wrong. I would come up during spring break and kind of winter break too, because I've definitely came for like my birthdays, like any big birthday, 16, 18, 21, I was in New York City. And think about like Manhattan on a 16-year-old person, like obviously you're gonna have dreams of like actually living here and making a life of your own. So from the jump, I was like, okay, I know I want to work in marketing, and I know I want to move to New York. And I just like put that on the universe, and it happened. Like God made it happen for me. Appreciate it. But I didn't really understand the difference between visiting and actually living in a city. It's extremely different. So let's get into it. So went to school, went to college. I didn't do my internships in person. I did them virtually because of the pandemic, and it just made more sense. I was saving money once I started seeing how much rent was, and I started to learn how expensive it is. I'm like, well, why would I do that when I can just intern virtually? I have a slight regret in that, because I do wish I came out here to experience, at least just for a summer, what is it like to live in a city like this versus just throwing myself out here. But then also, I think knowing me, that was probably for the best, because I feel like New York is one of those places you can't be too prepared for. You kind of just have to go with it and see if you survive, if you will. So yeah, I did just that. At first, like the summer before I started work, which was last summer, it was around June, July, when maybe June, I kind of came up with the idea of, okay, I might just stay at home and kind of do the hybrid thing. My grandmother lives in Jersey, so I was like, maybe I'll live with her for a couple months, save some money, or I would like go in between DC area, Maryland area, and New York. I was thinking about all the different ways I could make this work. And then finally, it was July. I text a friend who, she's no longer a colleague, which is so sad. She actually is just now making a big move to San Francisco, which is so wild to me. But I text my friend and I was like, hey, I'm thinking about actually living with someone again. And it's funny, I'll give you more background on that. I didn't even want to tell her that I was looking for a roommate, because at first me and her were going to live together. And then I was going back and forth on like, oh, do I want a roommate or do I not want a roommate? Because truth be told, I didn't have the best college roommate experience. One of them like absolutely loved. The other one I didn't get along with so well. So I think that kind of like tainted my opinion on like, do I actually want a roommate? And I went from looking at the rent prices and seeing how much it is to actually live where I want to live, and living by myself and what can I afford. Like, you know, of course, never want to live above your means. And I just remember hitting her up like randomly, so scared, because I'm like, dang, I just told her that I didn't want to live alone, and now she's living alone because of it. But I just like kind of threw it out there like, hey, like this is a neighborhood I want to live in, and if you know anybody looking for a roommate, just let me know. Because I knew she also had friends. She's 1 year older than me, but she had friends who were graduating with me. So I was like, just like, you know, put me out there. Well, it just so happened that her friend was moving out of the place I'm currently living in. And she was like, yes, same exact neighborhood that you're thinking about. And she like knew my roommate, and she was like, she's great. I've heard amazing things. I've met her a few times. I can connect you guys. And literally I had like a FaceTime call, and it's funny, we were just laughing about this not too long ago. Our first FaceTime call to like meet up with each other, I didn't pick up, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is such a bad first impression. Girl, I was asleep. I was literally asleep, and I was like, this is such a bad first impression. But like, she thought it was so funny, and she was very much aligned, like, okay, this girl cares about her naps. We're gonna be like this. Off the first phone call, like, both similar energies, very chill. And I think it was really when we started talking about how we're gonna decorate our apartment, that's when I was like, oh, okay, like this is a good match. Like we're gonna make this work. And I just got really lucky and blessed. Like I found a place, or the place was already found because she was staying in the same apartment, rent stabilized, beautiful neighborhood. I absolutely love my neighborhood. Huge apartment. You guys can go back on some of my older vlogs. You'll see like clips of how nice my apartment is, especially if you go back to the videos where I'm like decorating my apartment, you can get a really good feel for it. Or even when I moved in, like it's a big space. Like I'm right now sitting on the floor in between my window and my bed, but like you can kind of see like this is a pretty nice sized bedroom, especially for New York City. And my living room and just everything else, like it just worked out perfectly. And again, within budget, great roommate situation, everything was just perfect. Like it laid out perfectly. Like God answered quite literally all of my prayers, and I feel like that also confirmed like, yes, I want to move out here. I will say people have always been asking me, and I feel like a lot of the comments I get is like, oh, how did you find your roommate, or how do you find an apartment? So that was my story. Now I have friends who either moved with their friends from college, or like again, friends of friends. My other recommendation is to find Facebook friend groups or Facebook roommate chats, group chats, pages, chat, I don't know, but I'm definitely gonna insert something about that. That's a good and easy way to like post yourself or comment on people who are posting and reach out that way. You can either find a place that way. Some people might even be subletting, or you can just find like a roommate through that way. My friend Bella, you guys have seen her many of times, she was able to find her 2 roommates through those Facebook group pages. That's what it's called. And it worked out wonderfully. Like same situation. Everyone typically just does like a FaceTime call, like, you know, vet the person, maybe even meet up. It's always a gamble. So just going in knowing that like it might not be the most perfect situation or fit, but that's why leases are only 1 year. So you don't feel like you have to stay in that situation, or you have to stay living like with your current roommates, because that's not the case whatsoever. The #1 app I feel like most people use is Street Easy. That is probably the most reliable place to like search for apartments. I will say there's different seasons in New York. So like most people's leases start August 1st. So definitely like summertime is like really hot. A lot of people are looking for apartments. I would say between August and October, that's my recommendation. I know a lot of people who have like October 1st leases. And to me, that's kind of when like the last good batches go. Now rent is cheaper if you end up in like a January cycle, or I've never heard of like a December or February, but I'm sure they exist. With that being said, you're now stuck in that cycle unless your landlord allows you to like extend for a certain amount of months, which can happen, or like do like a month by month lease. That's a little bit more rare, but again, it does happen. Some people like the January leasing situation because again, you can end up finding a cheaper spot, but you're also limited to your options. There's just not a lot of apartments on the market during those seasons because not a lot of people are moving. I mean, I would not want to move in the dead of winter. I'm just keeping it real. There's another apartment site called Nooklin. I feel like not a lot of people know about that, but that's primarily for Brooklyn apartments. You can definitely, it's very similar setup as Street Easy, but of course less listings because again, not as many people know about it. But that was something that I was looking on. And then also there's another place called Listings Project, which I know a lot of people end up finding roommates on there. My uncle's partner, she was telling me all about it. And a lot of creatives too, they like to post on there because sometimes it's just a sublet situation. But yeah, those are like my other recommendations. But I feel like the top 3, the people you know, definitely use the people that you know and like find out their communities, their circles. And that's always better too because they can also vet the person for you. And then 2, Facebook, that's huge. And then 3, I would say Street Easy. Or maybe Street Easy and then Facebook. Facebook would be my third. But again, if you need a roommate, Facebook is probably the best option. Another common question I'm always getting is like, what are some things that you didn't expect, or what are some things you wish you knew about the city before like actually moving out here? One, I mean, this is kind of obvious and it goes without saying, but like how expensive the city is, but also just like how expensive it is to move, and deposits are so different out here. So obviously, like I had a deposit in college for those off-campus apartments I lived in, but a deposit used to be like $200, $300, and that was a deposit to sign your lease, and then it would go to your first month rent. Out here, baby, that is not the case. First and last is typically your deposit, and sometimes you might even get another fee thrown on there, which I think is absolutely ridiculous. I also think in your search, you should never pay a broker's fee. That's my personal hot take. Some people feel like it's worth it. I cannot say myself it is. I feel like there's too many options for us to be paying broker's fees, especially when you're doing the research, you're doing all the leasing agreements, and then you're gonna pay a broker who didn't even help. Anyway, but first and last, rent. I think a lot of people aren't used to that. I definitely wasn't. I didn't understand that. Again, everybody's area is different, but in Maryland, I feel like that's not the norm. And then also just like how the buildings are set up, like walk-ups and what is considered luxuries. Like I don't have an in-unit washer and dryer. That's typically a luxury, but the fact that we have laundry in our basement for some is like a huge luxury because they don't have laundry in their building. So you have to like think about, okay, if I'm looking for an apartment and I know this apartment might not have an in-unit washer or dryer, or even in the building, where's the local laundry mat? And our local laundry mat, I'll never forget, literally the first week or two that like we moved in, or I moved in, the laundromat is now becoming an apartment building. You might risk that laundromat no longer being a thing, which would be heartbreaking. My camera might overheat because it's set up on my like window and I just saw the sign. I'm hoping it doesn't. If it does, I might have to switch locations or just let it cool down for a minute and then try again. But anyway, also like how far away you are from your subway matters a lot, and what subways you have near you. That was something else like I didn't know going into it. Luckily, like where I work, I have most subways easily accessible to me. And most places I go to, like my local subway can easily take me there. I feel like that's a blessing, but not everyone has that blessing. Or sometimes people might move to a neighborhood and not realize, hey, you have to take a bus to get to a train. So is that rent worth it? Like, yes, you're saving money in rent, but the convenience piece, like that matters too. And also this is something that you won't know until like you obviously settle in. Like, where are your places that you like to go out? Where are your places that you like to eat and stuff like that? And how easily accessible is it? Like, is it readily accessible to you? That's something you won't learn until you just get here. And then like when you think about your next place, that would obviously become a factor. Like, oh, okay, I work out here, or I tend to go out here with my friends. I need to find like a line, a subway line that can like take me there. Obviously, work is like your biggest priority. That's something else that people don't realize, like the commute to work, like that matters a ton too. I always say like you should not be living somewhere where it takes you an hour to get to work. I think that will make your commute awful. Literally hell, right? But I feel like the sweet spot for most people is like 30 to 40 minutes, because it's never actually 30 to 40 minutes on the train itself. Typically it's like your walk to and from the subway, like to the subway from your house, and then from the subway to your office. That ends up being like 30-40 minutes, if you will. Anything beyond that, I would not advise. But I think that's like one of the other perks of New York. A lot of times it does feel like college. It feels like just a walkable city in general. It's always gonna feel like that college feeling. There's not a single day that looks the same as the other. That's just that. Like, I've had moments where I've had a friend hit me up and say, hey, Sister Nancy is performing for free outside the Rockefeller Center. Do you wanna go watch her? Hell yeah. That was on like a random Tuesday after work. That's insane. That doesn't typically happen. I'm trying to think about all the different comments I've received whenever I post about living out here. Another big one is like, how do I make my friends and how do I meet people? Honestly, you have to leave your apartment to make friends. I will say, if you are a homebody and you like to just chill and just stay inside, it is definitely going to be hard to meet people, obviously, because they're not just going to come to your front door. I met Bella in line at New York Fashion Week last year, and we just went to Costa Rica together. She was just at my family cookout, and we're like so freaking close. One of my best friends in New York, and I literally met her in line at a fashion show. She wasn't even living in New York yet. She was living in Ohio, and she came out here to go to Fashion Week. And I just invited her to dinner with MJ and I, and then we went out to like all these different rooftops, and we ended up at Tao. Was that Tao? I think that was Tao on like a Tuesday night, and we saw Jordan Woods and her boyfriend and her sister in that club on a Tuesday night. I feel like these are only stories that you're gonna get, honestly, in New York. But like, that's, to me, I feel like that's how easy it is to make friends. But also you have to maintain, one, and two, the follow-up is so important, because there's been other events or like friends of friends I've been able to meet, but like it's hard to like follow up, especially if you already have your core group, or if you have a lot of people from college, or like, I don't know, some other places that you may know them, and it might be a little difficult to go outside of your current community to make new friends. And the longer you live in a city, or the longer other people live in a city, I do think it becomes a little bit difficult for them to want to expand their community. But it's really just all about following up. With that being said, I will say like another important piece to learn is to like live within your means, and sometimes below your means. I do think like in New York, I just said like, oh, you have to leave your house, you can't be a homebody. But sometimes when you leave your house, you end up spending $100, and you're like, how did I just spend $100? I was supposed to just go grocery shopping, or I was just supposed to go grab lunch with my friend at a local deli, and now I'm getting drinks at this place, and now I've spent over $100. Like that that happened to me so much my first 6 months here. So I think that's something else I would say. Obviously, get those experiences, go out, but there's different ways that you can like end up not spending a ton of money. For example, if you really want to go to the clubs and whatnot, definitely go with a promoter. I don't think I've ever been to a club without a promoter. You DM, like honestly, the way to find a promoter too is to look up that club name. So let's take like Little Sister, for example. You can find that club name and then look at their tag, and usually there's like a bunch of promoters like tagging themselves at the table, or their people at the table and tagging the club name, or Tao is like another example. Or you can like see what hospitality group they're all a part of. You can go through that Instagram page, or like go through their following, and that's a quick way to find somebody. I love female promoters way more than the males. The women promoters, they're usually on it, a lot more respectful. There's been some promoters I felt like a little weird being with, but the beauty is like not only are you getting into the club, you're getting there like before everybody else, so it's a little bit calmer, and I prefer that versus walking into an overpacked, crowded club. But you're also getting free alcohol. You're not spending money. The most you're gonna spend on is Ubers, and I think the whole Uber budget, set a budget for the month. Like, okay, I'm only spending $150 on Ubers this month, and download this app. Okay, let's rewind. Download this app, Rocket Money, I believe it's the name of it. I'm gonna like insert it here. That's step number one, and create a budget for yourself. Like, okay, I make X amount of money. This is my rent. This is my bills. This is how much I need to spend on groceries a month. This is how much I can spend on Ubers and still feel comfortable. This is how much I can spend on eating out or like drinking. Like, make all these different categories and just keep up with it. Because you might think, oh my gosh, $150 budget for Ubers a month is insane, Cameron. And then it's week 2 and you've almost closed that budget because you weren't paying attention. Yeah. And then you might also say, oh, but like I'm the type to like take a subway. Well, when it's 3 a.m. and you only have, let's say, like the local trains are only running at that time, or even 2 a.m. or honestly, especially if you live in Brooklyn, after 10 p.m., if you're caught in Manhattan after 10 p.m., it's going to take you over an hour to get home. And that's just real. But I've done it like anytime before 1, I typically will still do it. Anytime after 1, it's like, it's not even worth it, honestly. But I think it's just being mindful of planning out your night and like knowing when to say no, right? I had to learn this so quick and easy. Okay, I'm going out to happy hour with my girls. I'm cutting this off at like 7. So that way I can take the subway if it's still daytime, or at least it's still early enough. I know everybody's out and about. Like, I'm gonna go at this time. Or let's say like, oh, I'm doing a late night dinner. Maybe I won't go to the club with them afterwards, because right now it's 11 o'clock and I still feel comfortable and safe to take the subway. Whereas if I go out with them afterwards, it's gonna be 2, 3 a.m. Now I'm taking an Uber home, and I'm spending way more money than I should have. There's no outline on this. I feel like that's so that's so obvious, but I just thought about this too. A lot of people have asked me about like different neighborhoods in New York, so let's get into it. Let's start with Manhattan, because I feel like most people prefer Manhattan, which is understandable. And honestly, if you don't have family or friends who live outside of Manhattan, that might be the starter place. I'll start upwards. So like Harlem, you have Central, West Side, East Side. I will say your Central and West Side, which I don't even know if there's a Central Harlem. That's probably not a thing, and I'm sure there's gonna be New Yorkers in my comments like, girl, that's not even a place. But you know what I mean, like more West Harlem. That's your typical, like, that wasn't Brooklyn. That was like the Huxtables, like brownstone, historical areas, jazz. They have so many cool parties. I haven't really explored Harlem. Oh my gosh, whoa. I have not experienced Harlem as much as I've wanted to, just because of where I live. It's a little bit harder to get to. But they have like a lot of, I believe it's called like the Jazz Stoop or something, like Stoop concerts on the weekends. I want to say Sunday, and it's like a big block party during the summer. It's really cool. Like, I'll insert a video about that. But that's like West Side Harlem. I've been to East Harlem a few times. Also, Harlem is where you're gonna get your braids done. Let me just start there. If you want box braids, knotless, boho braids, Harlem is where all of those shops are. You're gonna end up there eventually. That's where I get my hair done all the time. It's kind of inevitable. Like, that's the best prices you're gonna get and the best work. It's gonna be Harlem for your hair. East Harlem I've been to a few times. The only thing I would say about East Harlem is, depending on your neighborhood, I feel like things become a little bit more sparse and like spread out. And it doesn't feel like New York to me. Like, West Harlem still feels like New York, but East Harlem doesn't really feel like New York. And then also there's, unfortunately, really sad, like a lot of food deserts. So I think just being mindful about like where you live, and also you're kind of far from everyone. I don't, besides 125th, which I feel like is the primary stop if you're gonna go to East Harlem, there's not many like subways to my knowledge that can take you up there. So if you end up in East Harlem, I guess it depends too on like where you want to go out, but yeah, that's that. And then you have Upper East Side and Upper West Side. Don't know much about Upper West Side. I don't think I've explored over there, but Upper East Side, my friends used to live, my aunt used to live. It's a great neighborhood, very quiet, very family based, not that diverse. I will be honest, it's not that diverse. But you're near like Central Park, the Met. I've gone up there a couple times whenever I'm doing museums. It's also cheaper, I will say. People always are like, if you want to have more affordable rent in New York, you got to either go up north, like Upper East Side, East Harlem, West Harlem, or you got to come to Brooklyn. That's probably at this point the most affordable renting you're going to see. And you're probably like, whoa, like Upper East Side is like affordable rent. Isn't that like Gossip Girl? Obviously you have your neighborhoods. You have your neighborhoods within that area, and some of them are, yes, like the multi-million-dollar condos, penthouses, apartments, but then you also have like Yorkville, where I think most of those housing, they're older buildings too, which is probably why it's more affordable than like Lower East Side. Then you have Midtown. Midtown to me is just always corporate. That's how I view it. Anybody I know who lives in Midtown, I think the only reason why they might is because you can get a bigger space for like how much you're paying compared to living in like East Village. But like that area and then Murray Hill, I will say you're gonna get a lot of your frat bros, and some people also just want to be close to work, so that's why they live over there. Not only Murray Hill area, but also Phi-Dye. I'm skipping around now. I was going down, but now we're skipping. Phi-Dye in there, like some people like Phi-Dye too, because you get really nice luxury buildings for a lot cheaper than if you lived in a luxury building in downtown Brooklyn, shockingly. But yeah, you'll get like the doorman, the beautiful apartment, and it's still expensive, don't get me wrong, but I think it's definitely better than like obviously living in Lower East Side, Chelsea, West Village, like those areas. With that being said, it doesn't feel like a community. Whereas a place like, I think Chelsea and West Village feels a lot more like a neighborhood, community-based. East Village, in my opinion, I have a lot of friends who live over there. And I've dated a lot of people who live over there. That used to be the running joke that I love my Lower East Side boys. That area doesn't feel as much like a neighborhood to me, probably because that's where everyone goes out. So, and it also depends on how you define East Village versus Lower East Side. Some people don't define Lower East Side until you get to Alphabet City, which is like a fair point. But Lower East Side is where like all the popular clubs are, a lot of like popular bars. Lower East Side is expensive as hell to live in, but you are walking distance to literally all the top clubs. Any club that you think a celebrity is going to, you're walking distance from. You also have so much good food at your fingertips, and that's what I get jealous about. My friends who live around there, I'm like, ugh, around the corner you have like all these top-notch restaurants, and you also got like a Target and a Wegmans and a Whole Foods. Like, oh my gosh, that's the part of like living in the city that you will get versus Brooklyn. Brooklyn, where I live, is more residential. It kind of gives you the Upper East Side feel, if you will, just because of how many families are around here. It's quiet, again, like it's quiet. Whereas like in Lower East Side, you're always hearing people, there's sirens. It's your typical New York spot. My camera just overheated, so let's try and speed this up a little bit. Let's now get into Brooklyn neighborhoods. First one I'm going to talk about is like Williamsburg, Bushwick area. Williamsburg, you have a lot of food options, great food options. East Williamsburg, I think, is where like most of the clubs in Brooklyn are, just because of space. There's a lot more space over there. If you've ever been to Everyday People or heard of Everyday People, that's in like your East Williamsburg area. The Knockdown Center, I believe, is still considered East Williamsburg. East Williamsburg / Queens, like that like breaking point. Or is that East? That is East Williamsburg. Yeah. Then you have Bushwick, which is also bordering the Queens. That's another area. Bushwick has like some pretty good restaurants too. I won't lie, that area confuses me just a little bit. I feel like there's a lot of like construction, warehouses over there, and certain parts that doesn't really feel like the city. But I do know some people who like live over there. I will say like the #1 feedback I've gotten is you have to be super careful about the neighborhood you live in Bushwick, just because you might not have a grocery store readily available to you. And sometimes it's better, they want you to go into the city to come back into Brooklyn to get to certain places that they want to go to, and that's ridiculous. But that's our Brooklyn transportation system. Gotta love it. But yeah, that's that area. I will say my only qualm with Williamsburg and Bushwick overall is I don't think it's that diverse. That's just my humble opinion. I think that's all due to gentrification, if we're gonna keep it a buck, but that's just kind of where we're at right now. Yeah. Then you have other neighborhoods like Dumbo, downtown Brooklyn, that area. Dumbo, I love to go to, like, to visit. I cannot afford Dumbo. If you can afford Dumbo, hey, those are some beautiful apartments. I consider Dumbo to be a lot like Chelsea, honestly. A lot of your workout places are in Dumbo and downtown Brooklyn. That's why I'm in that area all the time. Downtown Brooklyn has all of those name brand stores I was talking about, like the Targets, Trader Joe's, Whole Foods. Wegmans, I want to say, is closer to Dumbo. Dumbo is very touristy though. That is my #1 thing. And the restaurants are overpriced and they're not even that good. Like, if you're thinking about places to eat, I wouldn't go and recommend Dumbo if I'm gonna keep it a buck with you. Then you have your other, like, I like to say, your Pilates moms neighborhoods. So you have Carroll Gardens, Cobble Hill, Gowanus, Borum Hill, Park Slope, Prospect Heights. Those are like all your Pilates mom neighborhoods. Very residential, very family based. There's a lot of cute like mom and pop shops in those like areas, especially Park Slope. They have a lot of sorry, I'm trying to speed this up so my camera doesn't die again, but let's reel it in. Park Slope has a lot of those neighborhood restaurants that are actually really good. Then you have the other area of Brooklyn where I might just be a little biased to, but like the Clinton Hill and Fort Greene neighborhoods, that is my favorite part of Brooklyn. I love Fort Greene so much good food over there. That's where like Spike Lee grew up and currently lives, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, the heat sign is on, so let's quickly get through it. Then you also have Bed-Stuy and Crown Heights, and further than Bed-Stuy and Crown Heights, Bed-Stuy is another area I love to go to. Tompkins Ave. They used to have like these regularly like weekly block parties, but that got shut down. That's a whole other video. Crown Heights I love. As somebody who is Caribbean, there's a lot of Caribbean restaurants over there, but I think like the Caribbean neighborhood of Brooklyn is really like your Flatbush area. So yeah, I feel like Flatbush is as far as I would go in to Brooklyn, especially if you work in the city. That's just a long commute. Flatbush is honestly really deep into Brooklyn. So if you're not the type of person who goes out in Manhattan or who doesn't like to club in Manhattan, then I feel like Flatbush, Crown Heights, Bed-Stuy might be good for you. However, if you do plan on going to those clubs in Lower East Side, you might want to live in like Williamsburg, or not even just Williamsburg, honestly, like downtown Brooklyn. It's like another good area, or Park Slope, South Slope. That is kind of deep into Brooklyn. It really depends on transportation, and that's why it feels so deep, because genuinely my camera shut off once again because it was overheating. It is 85 degrees outside, so I can't even say I'm surprised. But I'll end on this. I was just gonna say, a lot of times Brooklyn neighborhoods can feel really deep, especially if you work in the city or you go out in the city, have friends in the city. It can feel deep because of transportation. Again, that's a whole separate conversation about why transportation in Brooklyn is so bad. We can get into that if we really want to. But like getting from East Brooklyn to West Brooklyn is so freaking difficult sometimes that literally the maps will say like you need to go into the city to 14th Street to come right back in. That's so ridiculous, and that's something beyond me and beyond my pay grade. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed me yapping. That's pretty much what this video was. It was just like a bunch of yapping, talking about my New York experience. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you got your answers answered. That wasn't right. Hopefully you got your questions answered. And yeah, I had fun sitting on my floor yapping it up with you guys. And hopefully you guys come back and like see me yap some more. Okay, bye.